Aloha and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Got Your Six podcast. This six-question podcast brings together high performers to share their methods, strategies, and ideas, delivered in an informative and, most importantly, actionable way that'll help you lead yourself and those around you from the battlefield to the boardroom. Coming to you every episode, I'm your host, Tony Nash. And into the breach.
Nothing mentioned on this podcast is an endorsement or opinion of the Department of Defense.
I got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. Got your six, we got your back. I got your six.
Sixers, what an incredible treat we have today. Nick Witters is with us, talent management over at Night Ventures. Maybe you've never heard of them, but the clients that he works with and who he talks to on a daily basis have YouTube views in the billions. Nick, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Tony, it's a pleasure, man. Appreciate it.
We were talking off camera previously, and you had mentioned, I know you were security forces in the Air Force, but you ended up with an Army Accommodation Medal at the end of your last deployment. How did that all happen?
Yeah, man. So back in 2009, there was a tasking from the Army to go deploy as an Air Force member in a police transition team. So it was like Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, local PD, staters, etc. And, you know, when Air Force guys start dying, people get weird, right? The public gets a little weird about it. So you had to volunteer for this. Yeah. And so back in 2009, volunteered to be a 50 cal gunner in Baghdad, Iraq. Conducted 250 combat missions. Wow. I was like 20 years old. Just fresh out of high school. So, yeah, based on like, you know, those combat missions, some of the stuff we did down in Baghdad and the police stations we had to kind of work with, like Abu Ghraib. A few of us got a couple medals. So,
you were at Abu Ghraib?
Yeah, that was our main police station. And so we'd go there, train Iraqi police, stay overnight sometimes, do community policing in downtown Baghdad, you know, stuff like that.
So you go from downtown Baghdad in 2009 to being a lawyer, now working with, you know, talent management and people that are well recognized. What do you take from that time in the military that you implement now, say on the daily basis? Is there one thing in particular?
Yeah, man, I think like there's something to say about joining the military right after high school, right? And going in super green and just learning discipline, learning how to be organized, learning how to be a part of a team and also lead a team. A different type of communication structure between military and civilian, obviously, right? I mean, I get told all the time, man, you gotta be nice, man. You gotta be nice. I'm like, man, fuck nice. Get the job done, man. And so I try to be pretty PC. It's like, you join the military, you just learn a different, way of life. I'd say the blessing was doing 4 years and getting out, because you can get institutionalized when you stay in a very long time. But like, there's two different lives, right? Like going into the military, being a lifer, great life. Ton of my boys that I was deployed with, that I was stationed with, still in. I got out in 2011 and I joined in 2007. But a lot of my boys are still in, they're hitting like year 13, 14. So.
What was your inspiration to join the Air Force right out of high school? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's like the traditional like socioeconomic issue, right? It's like no way to pay for school, no way to go to college outside of taking out loans, which I didn't even qualify. I grew up super broke, real poor family, grew up in a single wide trailer, hour southeast of Seattle. And, I had a buddy who really wanted to join to be a Navy SEAL. He's like, dude, will you come with me? In 2007, recruiters were just signing people up left and right. So I was like, listen, I ain't signing, but I'll go with you. And so we ended up going. He wanted to do the Navy SEAL stuff. I was like, I'm just going to walk around the branches, see like what they do for school, because I really wanted to go to school. And I went to the Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, and ended up getting like pretty interested in the Air Force, given like their kind of pro focus of like education and stuff like that, opposed to like Army, Marines, like, no, go and do combat shit. I was like, I want to go to school and do some cool shit. And so we ended up parting ways. My boy ended up getting in trouble, got ineligible to join. 6 months later, I ended up going. He never did. He's like a dad right now, living in the same town I grew up in. Love the dude. Great dude. One of my really good friends, but very two different lives at the time.
And props to you for being, in high school and recognizing like, yeah, I want to go kick indoors and do cool shit. But at the same time, like, I need to go challenge myself in some sort of academia environment, arena, to kind of get what I really want out of this whole experience. So, I mean, I don't know if you recognize it at the time, but man, that takes a lot of like self-reflection and like understanding of where you want to go and what your goals are in life.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I always say it's like a young kid's ego, right? Like the boys that want to go and kick indoors also need to understand, like, are you doing it for an ego play or because you're like, this is just what I want to do? And I kind of, having grown up, played sports all through, my younger years and everything, very competitive, but I also knew that like I wasn't going to be a professional athlete and blue collar work only pays so much. So, so you got to think proactive. You got to be, you got to look a few steps ahead, chess, not checkers. So.
Absolutely. Do you take some of those experiences now, especially when you're dealing with content creators, with a lot of, sometimes people like to say there's generational gaps, but understanding like, hey, what's the long play? And, really trying to push and hone in on people. It's like, hey, this, it might be cool to have it G5 now, but where do you want to be in 50, 60 years as opposed to like in 5 months?
I mean, everything's based around respect. And you can't look like a suit to these younger kids, right? So if you're clean cut and you're wearing a suit and tie, man, you're probably already lost, right? And so, I'm 33. Yeah, my resume speaks for itself when it comes to like the legitimacy of things that I advise my clients on. But I have clients who are like in their young 20s, it's just about being personable and being able to kind of articulate things in their language. But you got to kind of like get down and swim with them and have them kind of see you as one of their own for them to kind of hear you. Because then they just think you're a boomer, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, okay, boomer.
100%.
Is there a specific instance you can kind of go back to where you had to like almost say, let's check yourself to show that level of respect and shared understanding?
I mean, all the time, man, all the time. I mean, I'd gotten brought onto a client's team and it was tough. It's tough, like being the new guy coming in. It's like when you're like in the military, right? Except the military is like very family oriented, right? Like when you wear the uniform, you're all on the same team. But you can equate it to like being a new guy on a sports team, right? You got to like earn your stripes. And I think that's true for anything you do, right? Any sort of line of work. Even like if you decide to go to school, right? If you're like late in life going to school as like a freshman or a senior and you're in your 20s and you're not like a 19, 20-year-old kid, like you have the same hurdles when you're going into class from when you're going into a profession as, a white collar guy or anything else, but especially working with clients, right? Because they're like tight knit, so how do you break in,
Because usually at that crew, like when they come to you, they have a crew set, like they have trust, they've gotten this far with their team. And sometimes that means taking people off that crew, which isn't something we do in the military. So that's it can be foreign. Because they want to grow and do something and expand in a certain direction where you have a particular skill set. Almost kind of did the Liam Neeson movie quote,
yeah.
But we're not going to do that.
That works.
Where you have a particular set of skills and you can help them get there, right? So you're kind of dealing with all these different stakeholders all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing is to associate yourself with like the best brand, the best in class business, and like especially at night. It's a 360 talent management company, venture studio, and a labs business where we like incubate businesses with our creators and or build businesses and input creators and build insane brands. And so just kind of being a part of and aligning yourself with the best gives you an added layer of legitimacy. So
yeah,
it's like it's
like any
who
skill
you associate
identifier
yourself with. You hear that growing up as a kid.
Okay.
You're hanging out with the dirtbag kid smoking, well, you're a dirtbag kid that smokes, So it's kind of a lot of things you learn as a kid goes true to later in life as well.
And that's wild that those lessons continue to carry over. It shows how fundamental they are.
Yeah.
Now, being in that innovative culture that you are in over at Night, how are you challenging yourself now? Because there's a lot of different moving parts going on, like you mentioned. How are you specifically challenging yourself?
I mean, the one thing, man, is just like make yourself useful, right? Just dive in with both feet and don't be afraid to fail, right? I think depending on the business, like hesitation will kill you. And in some businesses, if you don't have a certain level of kind of hesitation, that might kill you, right? So like attorneys are typically very risk averse. You hire an attorney to tell you why not to do something, right? The good ones should tell you why you shouldn't, but how you could. If, you know, I'm not advising you, but yeah, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, man, it's complicated. But I think the number one thing is, man, you just like, if something's interesting to you, you just put your head down and charge after it. So.
Is there an experience recently where you did that, where you had to kind of say, all right, I might not know 100% how to solve this problem, but I'm going to put myself into the breach and step into it?
Yeah, I mean, my client I have right now, he's a former Navy SEAL. He's like the biggest true crime guy on YouTube, best storyteller on the planet. We started a podcast like 5 weeks ago. Neither of us knew how to start a podcast. I was like, you create the episode, I'll figure out how to like get us live. And, you know, and that's everything from like pre-promotion, getting a trailer, getting artwork done, like for your intellectual property, like what's your podcast artwork going to look like? Like, how are you branding yourself? Like all this stuff on the fly. And then like, how do we upload? Like, where do we upload? Like, you know, and that is effectively, going back to my last point, is like, just got to jump in with both feet, you know, and like worst case scenario, like, all right, we're going to push it a week. We didn't gather as much information that we feel comfortable moving this thing forward. You know, there's always contingencies you can do, but that was probably the biggest thing. It was like, neither of us knew what the hell we were doing. And now we have the biggest podcast in the US and on Spotify for 5 weeks straight.
And I was going to say it was on Spotify, #1, as soon as I uploaded today. I know you posted a picture too of that. And again, you're not a big pat on the back guy. I know you're not, but kudos to you for that, and continue to just take what he's doing and expand it because storytelling is universal. I
mean, all credit to my client, man. I mean, that dude's an animal. Like, he's the one creating it. It's content is everything. It don't matter what kind of idea you got. If it sucks, it's not going to perform well, you know? And so I simply act as like an advisor and a supporter. And, you know, when you're in talent management, if your client wants to do something, you got to figure out how to do it. And you got to do it to the best of your ability. And you can't make excuses. You can't drop balls. You can't fumble shit. You got to just figure it out. And a lot of it's like being innovative, doing the hard work, staying up late, doing the research, asking people, being vulnerable, and asking your teammates, like, hey, like, who do you talk to? Have you done this before? Da-da-da. Like, really leaning on each other.
Do you think being vulnerable has really helped you expand in your role? Not only just at Night, but, you know, all the different companies and organizations that you work with, where you're able to say, hey, I don't know how to get any farther. Let me go find some people that do know to kind of make sure we get to the end state here.
Yeah, I think the one thing is just having like conviction in your story. But when it comes to shit you don't know, you just say on it and you figure it out, you know? But if you don't know, then don't say you know. You just be like, look, I'm going to figure it out. Or, hey, give me a day. That's it. And clear communication cannot be more, cannot, you know, double down on that hard enough. Clear communication.
And that also applies in content creation too, is like the clearer you deliver your message, the more widely accepted it is.
Yeah, totally.
You know? Totally. As you deal, you know, with different content creators, what is kind of the thing you see that separate the top 1% or top 0.001% versus kind of everybody else? Is that commitment to the craft where they just don't quit even when like they feel like, hey, we've reached as far as we can go? Or is there something else that you kind of advise people on?
I mean, you got to be like, The Rock says shit every day on Instagram. You got to be the hardest worker in the room, right? Like, I don't care if you get a bout of luck, that luck's going to die down. Like, you're not going to be lucky forever, you know? And I think the people who persevere through, like, the tough times always end up on top if they don't quit. And you got to have a good team around you. You know, whether you're the talent themselves, whether you're the representative of talent, if you got to have a good team around you. It's definitely not a one-man show.
What's the first thing you look for? Go ahead.
No, it's not a one-man show.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it always comes back to that sense of community and tribe, which is something that's instilled in a lot of people that are in the military or have military experience, where they know they can depend on the person to the left and right of them, regardless of the situation.
Absolutely.
As you go to build a team, what do you kind of look for first, or do you assess how do you go into a situation before I don't want to lead you in any direction?
I mean, like when it comes to like building a team.
Yeah.
I hate hiring, but I love firing. I'm just going to be straight up. Unless you got to fire your friends. That shit sucks. It's tough, man. I always just try to find the hungriest people I can find. Like, you don't got to be the smartest. You don't got to be the sharpest. You don't got to be the most street smart, but you got to be the hungriest, period. Like, I'd rather tell you to slow down, or, hey, back off, or, hey, this, than be like, hey, what's up with this? Hey, why is this not done? Why do I got to ask you twice? Like, the moment you get into that territory, you're shot. Yeah. You know?
And how do you kind of pull that out of people when you're talking to them before you bring them onto the team? Like, what questions are you asking?
I mean, I lean on a lot of my team to kind of help me find people, right? Because I think a lot of people just are bad at their job. I think a lot of people don't have it. I would give a lot of people a lot less chances. But you can't build a team like that. You can't build a business like that. But if you hold yourself up to a certain standard, then you know what the standard is. And if they don't meet it, then you get cut. You know, I've always had respect for people in the military that were my superiors if they did the work that they asked me to do themselves. It's like, oh, you want me to sweep? And I know you would sweep too. I'll sweep every day. But like, you're not going to respect someone who's not going to do the work that they're asking you to do, or haven't done it to perfection for months or years before you've done it. You know, you get a lot of people with, you know, they just want things handed to them, you know, and then no one wants to work for things anymore sometimes. So it's what it is.
How do you get people to get on track, or at least give them a chance to understand the greater purpose of the mission that you're on as a team?
If you can get away from the entitlement, then I think it just is like showing them by acting, right? Like if they see you every morning up at 6 a.m., smashing the gym, throwing emails down, conducting business, you're staying up late, you're handling your work, and you're progressing, I think that should motivate people. But here's the thing that I really like outside of being a tough ass. It's very much this. You should always strive to be helpful. You should always ask your teammates, hey, how can I help? How can I be help? How can I be of service? Hey, how can I help you? Right? Because there's going to be a time, and I know there will be, when you need to ask someone to help you out with something. And at that time, you're going to see the people who like are going to be good teammates, or people who are like, no, I know you've helped me 10 times, but I'm too busy, man. Sorry. Well, guess what? Not going to be there for you anymore. So you get to like, through conducting proper business, you get to see people's character, right? So
you talked about character there as you kind of closed out your answer. And I want to kind of take that and go back to what you talked about, you know, having a set standard, right? Character is constantly tested through adversity, as we've talked about, you and I, before, not only on the podcast, but beforehand. Where has your character been tested, or where's your greatest failure in your life that has ultimately led to a success, or the greatest success that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, got fired from one of my jobs. I mean, I had this job at this place that like I would kill to have gotten it, and I got in, and just was in a bad mindset, had lost a bunch of people in my life at that time, and was going through some pretty tough times, and ended up getting fired. And after that, it's like, there's a famous quote I like. It's like, it's not how high you climb, it's how high you bounce from when you hit bottom. Right. And so I always look at that as like inspiration for the tough times, you know, because anyone could just have like an astronomical rise, but the moment they hit adversity, like, can you stand back up? And so anyways, after getting fired, I ended up retaking the bar because I'd failed it the first time. Retook the bar exam, passed it, scored very high. And then after that, I was getting ready to go do my MBA. And then I got a job offer to work at night and became a talent manager. So, and all good things happen as long as you can push through the adversity.
And what allowed you to kind of say, hey, you can take this risk and push through this adversity? We're going to get through this and be better on the other side. Where did you have to dial into to really understand that?
I mean, some people just have that like blunt force attitude of like, I'm just going to go, and if I fail, I'm just going to go some more. If I fail, I'm just going to go some more. Right? Like, I mean, it gets exhausting, trust me. Like when you've taken hit after hit after hit, it gets exhausting, right? But you just appreciate things a little bit better than most when you've had a certain level of adversity than others.
So is it that gratitude piece that really helps that maybe people wouldn't think about, where you, like you said, you can take a lot of hits to the face, but you're grateful when you're not getting hit in the face?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like there's just some people are just cut from a different cloth where like they can handle a few good hits, right? But like life is going to beat you down, man. Like plain and simple, get ready for it. It's going to happen. And you just, I don't know, the personality of some people just are very bullheaded to where, you know, they're just not going to let that last failure be like the end all be all. You know, I mean, depending on how people are born into money or born into privilege or born into poverty, like it's the reason why people join the military. Probably socioeconomic, right? Couldn't pay for school, couldn't do this, Well, that drives a whole different life than someone who family gave them a college fund, they go straight to college, and then they drop out because they're like, oh, college sucks, right? It's just like, you know, life just delivers you things at birth. And, you know, I'd say there's lucky and unlucky. It's like, are you lucky because you were born into a family with money, or are you lucky because you were born into a situation that made you hungry from day one, you know? So I think you just live with what you're dealt with, and you just try to be a good person and work as hard as you can.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Nick, before we kind of close out, I have one last question for you. Nick Witters, how are you better today than yesterday?
Oh man, you just gotta, every day you gotta be better. I mean, every day I take 10 steps back, right? But if you're taking 20 steps forward, you're still moving forward, right? And I think the moment you're complacent and you think that like you've learned all of life's lessons, that's when it hits you the hardest. So you gotta stay humble to like what's gonna hit you in the face every day.
What humbled you today?
Yeah, we'll leave that for the next one. How about that?
All right.
We'll leave that for part
cliffhanger.
2. There we go.
I love it. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Before we go, where can people go to reach out to you?
I mean, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm very vocal on LinkedIn. I mean, you can link my email if you want. Happy to reach out if any veterans, you know, have veterans or active duty want to chat. Happy to. The one thing with that is like there is no roadmap if you stay in or if you get out. So you definitely have to carve your own road. But I'm happy to like help anyone if they reach out.
Nick, thank you for sharing your time with us, your strategies, your methods, and of course, thanks for having our 6.
Of course, man.
Appreciate it.
You're a great one, my friend.
I don't know what you've been told, Sixers, but the lawyers would like us to remind you that the views, opinions, and comments expressed on the Got Your 6 podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests, to include current and previous Department of Defense employees, and should in no way be considered the opinions of or endorsements on behalf of the Department of Defense or any of its components, divisions, contractors, or other current and previous staff members.